The interesting and somewhat alarming fact about the MBTI is that, despite its popularity, it has been subject to sustained criticism by professional psychologists for over 3 decades. That's pretty serious. Uh, that's like really serious. So, um, what I'm doing in this video is I'm just reading some quotes from some criticisms of the MBTI I found, and I'm going to respond to them um, using my brain. So, the first one, there's around a 50% chance that you will fall into a different personality category compared to the first time you took the test. So, this could mean either the MBTI doesn't measure anything that's real, and so it's not repeatable, like you won't get repeatable results, or it could mean that people suck at understanding themselves and they really um, they have delusions about how they are as people, which if you live on this planet, that should not surprise you at all. Um, and the other possibility is that the MBTI questions are poorly worded, which definitely could be true. Um, anyway, so that itself isn't an indication that there's something wrong with MBTI. It's an indication that there could be something wrong with it. But if if you think that a personality test only has value if people get the same results every time they take it, then you're assuming that people understand themselves perfectly, and that's ridiculous because um, what the MBTI is based off of is Carl Jung's work um, about psychological types, and so it's based on a theory about how the mind works, how people's personalities work on a deep level. It's not just based on behavioral traits, and so um, you're going to get a disconnect between the way people the way people's brains function and what they understand about the way their brains function. So, of course, if it measures something real, people aren't going to be able to get the same results every time um, because and until they have a little bit of training about the theory about how the brain works. So, um, when I first took it, I got ISTJ with like 1 point towards sensing, and then the next time I took it, I got INTJ. So like 3 years later, I took it again for a college class. Or no, the first time was for a college class. The second time was just because I wanted to know what it was again. Um, and I yeah, and so I got INTJ the second time. I got INFP the third time. Never got INTP, and then I just got INTJ every time after that. It's because the more I researched it and the more I understood about it, the more I realized what intuition was, and the more I understood the terminology behind it. So I am totally fine if people are terrible at understanding themselves. I don't think that reflects poorly on the theory unless there's a better way to convey the concepts behind the MBTI. So a second criticism is that the MBTI mistakenly assumes that personality falls into mutually exclusive categories. You are either an extrovert or an introvert, but never a mix of the two. And they say that there's an imaginary dividing line here. So if you happen to test on the other side of this imaginary dividing line, um, you have to be an introvert or you have to be an extrovert. and never a mix of the two. So, um, in my personal experience, it's been pretty clear, like what 90% of the people I know are. Like it's pretty clear. Um, like people really are either introverts or extroverts, like 90% of the time. And the other 10% of the time, they're usually introverts who are good at faking being extroverted, or extroverts who are in an introverted phase. Um, People who just claim to be ambiverts and just super rare unicorns that are just amazing and super well rounded. They're usually introverts that um, have like it doesn't matter. If you look at the psychological functions, your primary one is either extroverted or introverted, and your secondary one is introverted or extroverted. If you're well developed, I mean, eventually you're gonna be pretty much both extroverted and introverted because you'll be so good at using both of them that extroversion never drains you as much anymore, and introversion doesn't bore you as much anymore. Like if you're an extrovert. So, um, yeah, I think this criticism just comes from not really understanding the theory behind it. Um, this is a fun one. There's no evidence to show a positive relation between MBTI and success, MBTI type and success within an occupation, nor is there any data to suggest that specific types are more satisfied within specific occupations than are other types. Well, I found a document one time about the aerospace engineering field because I was interested in it. And like INTJs were super overrepresented in that. So how is that not an indication that they either prefer on average aerospace engineering more than other types or that they are more able to do it than other types? It makes no sense to think otherwise. It obviously means something. um, unless they all decide to go into it because some test told them that they should. Hey, this random questionnaire that you took one time and the counselor that talked to you both suggested that aerospace engineering would be a great fit for you. Okay, now there you go. For the rest of your lives, go and do that. Um, it, it means something when a type is overrepresented in a field. Um, so obviously you don't say, okay, my type is this, so obviously I should go into this. You just it's just a nice thing to know that people who are similar to you um, are making similar decisions. Um, and also, I kind of would prefer a field with more of my personality types um, because obviously my type is the best of all the 16. Anyway. Some even take the sensible step of avoiding them altogether, recognizing that human personality does not neatly fall into 16 or any other definitive number of categories. We are far more complex creatures than psychometric tests can ever reveal. Wow, that is so amazing. It's so complex that we shouldn't even try to categorize any of the attributes of our uh, of our psychology. We should just say, "Ah, crap! Like it's so complex, we'll never understand any of this." And let's not divide. See, I don't get this. It's kind of part of the concern that people have that MBTI puts people in boxes. If you don't put them in 16 boxes, you're pretty much just putting them in one box as like just people in general. And that's boring and useless and stupid. So, um, So I never really got that argument. That bugs me probably more than anything else. I think it comes from like a feeling perspective maybe that people are just these magical creatures that the second you try to understand them is like the second that you make mistakes about what you know about them. And you can never understand people. People aren't meant to be understood. They're meant to be treated like magical magical beings that are just the way they are for no reason at all. And that's completely useless. So, oh well. So I think I think most of the criticisms of MBTI come from a failure to recognize what it actually is for. Um, like a, I think I'll mention this in my video that I'll do about the different kinds of stupid there are. But basically, people who look at who have a problem with like statistics and individual circumstances. So that's why the MBTI doesn't suck, but I'm going to talk a little bit about how the MBTI has been useful to me. So it's helped me figure out how to have conversations with different types, like FE dominance, SE, and SI. Those dominants have always been difficult for me to communicate with, but an FE, I still don't. I know how I could communicate with them that would be really nice and really smooth, but I don't ever want to. Like, maybe this is weakness of mine, but FE just sort of makes me feel nauseous. I just can't stand people trying to like own my emotions. Um, it's just anyway. Um, so I'm not sure I am good at communicating with extroverted feelers yet, but extroverted sensors, I'm much more quick and to the point and concrete, and I like to use like if I ever have to explain anything abstract, I have to use like analogies with like a lot of physical motion involved, um, so they can really get the image and tie it together with the concept. Because behind SE is NI, and I know that their NI can grasp things if it's fed to them from their SE. So then SI, like this is a big one for me. I've learned how to complement SI types pretty well. Um, like they don't like visionary and bold and dynamic. These are things that they don't really care about as much. And so the the kind of words that they like to hear in compliments are consistent, reliable, solid, um, helpful, those kinds of things. Um, and so I've learned how to give compliments in that way instead of and I think they like it a lot more. Um, I also try to only have short conversations with them because I'll inevitably try to push it into something that's too weird for them. So um, the real benefits of the MBTI don't come until you understand it pretty well. And I've been able to use my understanding of MBTI to communicate with these types that are different from me. Um, and the biggest one is sensing versus intuition. I now know why the vast majority of people think fundamentally differently from me. Um, I never got why like my older brother, for example, could be so smart but so uninterested in thinking. I never understood it until I looked into MBTI a lot. Um, yeah, that was the greatest gem that I got from MBTI. I like it doesn't matter introverted or extroverted sensing. There are ways of communicating with them that work for both types, and and it's just really helpful for me to know how to deal with that. Um, Also, now I know another benefit was that I know how like why I am the way I am and why I didn't know anybody else growing up that was the way that I was. So that was really cool to be able to figure out. Um, and now I'm realizing that, or and it's also helped me realize that people's personality types are pretty much with them from birth, and that they can choose to develop different aspects of it, but the fundamental stack of functions doesn't really change very much. Like, and so and so I'm not trying to figure out a way to change large portions of the population anymore. I'm trying to figure out how I can deal with that and how they can develop. It helps me cope with the differences a lot better with people. Um, so the main thing is, I think MBTI does measure something that's real. Dario Nardi, he's 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 done functional MRIs of different personality types, and I would highly encourage you to look at his research. It's super awesome. And the way people's brains work are like fundamentally different, and there are patterns that are consistent with different types. So there are real things that MBTI is measuring if you get the personalities right. Um, there's some research that suggests that type is inherited partially, like 40% inheritance for the most inheritable trait, I think. Um, I think that maybe introversion or extroversion could be like caused by like different chemicals in your body. Doesn't matter. But it's all about the brain though. It's not about this beautiful. It's not about this beautiful holistic theory that just is beautiful in itself and it's like a true fundamental thing about people and the universe that will never change or anything. I think it has a lot more to do with um, neuroscience and how the anatomy of the brain works and what is useful in society from like a group selection, like evolutionary group selection standpoint. I think I think that's a lot more that has potential to be a lot more revelatory in figuring out what is actually working in people's brains, what actually exists in people's brains, than just some beautiful thing. Um, Biology doesn't always fit beautiful theories. There are a lot of there's a lot of variation, a lot of exceptions, and that's the point. That's why biology is great. So, um, so it doesn't have to be symmetric. Introverted sensing doesn't have to be analogous to introverted intuition in every single way. So the point is to find what is true and not what is beautiful. It just so happens that usually whatever ends up being true and real ends up being beautiful and symmetric. But the beauty isn't what makes it real. So yeah, so as long as you realize what the MBTI actually is and what it's for, um, you shouldn't you shouldn't have issues with it.